Okay guys, welcome back to our fourth video. We've only got two more videos. How sad. How sad. We're going to continue on our Exodus series here. We're going to look at the idea of freedom and unpack this a little bit. We've gone through the idea of captivity to rescue to God's presence, some really good conversations, and now we're into freedom, because this is so much of what Exodus is about freedom. Can we just touch or start to define freedom a little bit? I have written here, freedom is freed from, not free of. Right, so freedom is such a buzzword these days. It's. I mean, the Israelites, they're free and yet they're grumbling. There's such a pushback. God takes them on such a journey. Can you guys just unpack freedom a little bit for us, like culturally speaking, but also then what you see freedom being from a biblical view?
Can you unpack freed from? It's not freed from, it's free of. Can you unpack what that would mean in this story?
Sorry, it's freed from, not free of.
Okay, so freed from what?
Israel are freed from Pharaoh's rule.
Yeah.
Right? But then we associate, okay, then they're free to do whatever they want. So God comes and there is a way to live with him. You're not free of limitations and boundaries.
Okay, so you're freed from Pharaoh's rule, but you're not free of rule.
Yeah. Which I think is almost offensive these days. And there's a rebellion in us that doesn't like that. So, yes, freed from Pharaoh's oppression, but then moved into the covenantal God who makes a covenant.
Yeah, it's probably fair to say, like, from a modern Western progressive mindset, that's offensive. Freedom. Because freedom in our modern Western post-Enlightenment mindset is like, as I was having a wee laugh earlier on, listening to the Soup Dragons, I'm free. I'm free to do what I want any old time.
Yeah.
You know, so that song comes out in the 90s, and that very much captured the spirit of a generation of going, freedom's just, you know, I can do what I want any old time, and that's what freedom is. Yeah. But actually that's not. That's actually a path to slavery. Because that whole movement of, you know, I know this is maybe show my age a bit, but that whole movement of, you know, the acid house, you know, rave scene, you know, what it led to is, you know, real serious drug addiction, you know, the societal breakdown, socioeconomic impact, political impact. It has serious ramifications, and political impact, by the way, is key in the Exodus story too. They were in political slavery, economic slavery, as well as a spiritual slavery too, which we can identify. We mustn't lose that as part of the story, I don't think. No. So actually, freedom in our modern Western mindset is actually, if we move to the end of its logic, it's actually slavery. Yeah. Because its outcome will put us back into chains again. And so what we think will bring us freedom actually brings us slavery, which perhaps, and I'm just suggesting this, is this why we have a very depressed, very low, very needy society now who's looking for all the answers and all of these things because they're promised that this will bring them freedom and it hasn't.
Absolutely.
Does that seem too ranty? Sorry.
No, I think, well, you're statistically speaking bang on. Freedom is talked about so much, and yet we have, for the first time in history, 22-year-olds recording higher levels of loneliness than 72-year-olds, right? Like,
in what's meant to be the most socially connected.
I know, irony.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So again, the freedom is, you can connect with anyone everywhere, all over the world. You know, it promises this connectivity, this depth of friends. You can reconnect with friends from the past. You can deepen all these relationships, but actually, when you go to the end of it and you get there, it's like you get in this big empty space. Yeah. It's like I'm free, but I'm lonely. But I'm lonely. What does it mean? What does my freedom mean? Freedom hasn't brought me what it promised. For me, freedom in the world's eyes and in the kingdom of the world, in Pharaoh's eyes, whatever empire is, it whispers a promise that it can't keep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. You said something brilliant earlier about freedom is not. You said freedom is a way of living. Do you remember what you said there?
Yeah, freedom sometimes is promised to be this goal, or freedom's like the outcome, and when you get there, then you'll be free. But freedom is a way of being and a way of living, and freedom is a path, and any path has to have boundaries, or else it ain't a path. It's it's openness, and that's where you get lost. That's where you get slaved. That's where you struggle. Freedom needs boundaries.
It's so funny, like, and Jill, I'm coming to you here because I would say one of the biggest criticisms that I hear of life in God's kingdom or life with God is that it is restrictive. He's the fun. He's the killjoy. He's holding something back. You can't do whatever you want to do. So why would I ever be a Christian? Why would I follow the way of Jesus? Like, what would you say to freedom and what you're seeing in the Exodus story here?
I think what's even interesting is the language. Like, they're freed from, and you've alluded to that, freed from, freed off. But then it's like, and we've already talked about this, about the presence of God. They are free to be with God. And I sometimes think that it's even what you're saying as well. Like, the end goal isn't, oh, you're free. The pathway isn't, great, you're on the right path. We are going somewhere, and the movement is always going to be within God. Like, we, at the end of that path, well, he's on the path as well, so we can ignore that. But the whole thing, we are journeying freedom towards God. And the reason people get so frustrated is until you find your place in God, there is that deep discontent, right? And I think that's why, as followers of Jesus, people do notice there's something different. Like, we don't fall apart when the world falls apart. And, like, I don't know, maybe that's too brass to say, but, like, or maybe we shouldn't fall apart when the world falls apart, because I know there's still struggles and we're still journeying all of that thing. So I don't mean to be brass with that at all, but I think there's this idea that we have found something that totally changes everything, and we're free to choose them. But yet I think you're right that people then would look on and think, but are you really free? Are you free? Is God controlling you? You know, is it, is that freedom? And I think one of the big things in this story then is, like, they're free, they're in his presence, and then he gives the law, which sounds so, like, I don't know what goes off in your brain when you hear law, but I think rule, restrictive.
Yeah, not the most
Right?
joy.
Right, it's not the biggest joy, but actually
But
there's
it is.
Right.
There's,
It is, It's really good.
it's a good thing.
There's freedom. There's freedom by God saying, do you know what? Don't steal.
Yeah.
That allows you to live in freedom. And that allows me to live in freedom. Don't covet. Like, that's deeply freeing. Because if you trust in me that I have all that you have, and all that you are is to be found in me, you don't need anything else that somebody else has. That's remarkably freeing. Yeah. I just think there's so much beauty in the Ten Commandments, actually. There's so much beauty and freedom. And thank goodness. I don't have to tell you I'm feeling fine when I'm not. I don't have to lie. I can bring the truth to you in safety, that, as you follow Jesus and as I follow Jesus, that's freedom, And
I think the thing with the law is, like, see if we camp around that idea, the law is good, right? It's not a negative thing. I think it changes okay, this is a good thing. Okay, let's explore that. Because I actually think what the law does, it reveals the heart of the lawgiver, and it's what you're touching on. Like, God doesn't want us to encounter what it hurt.
Break, yeah.
And you think of, like, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't covet. Like, they're all things that lead to destruction, and he doesn't want us going there. So it sounds restrictive, but actually it produces love. If the goal, we talked about this in one of the other videos about, like, God is love, and he is wanting to love on us and for us to love on him. And of course, Jesus summarizes the law. What does he say? Love God, love your neighbour. So there's something where this law is supposed to produce love in our lives. And I suppose the biggest thing then with the actual written law, what we see then Jeremiah even speaking into is, like, you can keep the letter of the law, but your heart's, like, what's going on with your heart? Yeah. Like, you actually don't love people. So on paper, it can look like, great, Jill, you don't steal, that's class. But if I don't love people, on paper I may have kept it. But if my heart is hardened in any way, and it's like, I always remember Paul teaching on the Ten Commandments, Paul Reed, that is, and I remember him saying, like, the law taught you not to commit adultery, but it actually doesn't teach you how to love your spouse, right? Which I always think is fascinating. So it tells you what not to do, But in itself, those written words don't teach you how to love. That only comes from God. Like, you're only ever able to operate in the full freedom of the story by being in his presence and allowing his presence to work in your life so that you become more like him, which is back to the garden, image of God. So the whole thing's just being recreated for us to find what is the goal of freedom. It's God. He's the goal.
Yeah.
I think freedom is a way of living, and freedom is we are free to be with God. Those are two brilliant nuggets for us, and even in our own discipleship. So I want to give you guys a chance to chat through, and then we'll see you in a minute. Okay, guys, welcome back to part 2 of our 4th video. We're just talking through freedom, and hopefully you had some good chats with your Connect group. I'm having a lot of thoughts about freedom here. We were chatting, obviously, in the break there as well. I guess where I'd love to then launch us into this second part and have a conversation around is based off Exodus 16. It says this, when they start to get hungry in the wilderness. If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you've brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. So I guess my question is, do we always want freedom? Right? We talk about it's culturally it's a buzzword. In church we are the free. The Israelites are set free. They're freed from captivity. But then they say we want to go back. So how do we? I can sit here as a disciple to Jesus and go, yeah, I relate to that. We've talked a little bit about going back to what we know. Where do you land that, Jill? Where do you see that?
Yeah, I think you see it through this whole story, and we were chatting there about how, their complainings and their difficulty of remaining in freedom and learning how to live in freedom. Like, they constantly want to go back. They're constantly complaining. They're doubting God's provision. They're doubting God's even there. When they can't see him, they start to have a panic. When they lose Moses, they start to have a panic. So when they don't know what to do, they go back. And I do think that is so... I think that's a human thing. When we don't know where we're going, we'll either just stay still or we'll go back to what we know. We even see that in the New Testament with, like, Peter, like, after the resurrection, what do those boys go? We'll just go back to fishing.
Just go back to what I know.
Right, we've seen, like, incredible things, and we've seen the kingdom of light totally pierce the kingdom of darkness. It's class. But now Jesus is gone, we can't see him. We'll just go back to fishing. And I just think there's this constant thing, I think, within us it's a journey of faith as well. It's a journey, and we've said that several times throughout this, it's a journey of unknown. It's a journey of trust when you can't see. Like, that's what faith is in its very essence. It's like, because if you hope for what you have, it's that whole thing, you hope for what you do not see, right? When you see it, you have it, so you don't have to have faith anymore because you're holding it. Where this whole idea of faith is a movement towards something that we one day will possess. But I think there's something deep within us. There's this constant tension of learning to lean in and trust. And you see that in this story, the Israelites go back almost in their spirits. We just want to go back there. At least we know. At least we knew what we were having. It might have been terrible, but we knew it was going to be terrible. This unexpected, not knowing is scary. And I do think that's most people's stories. Yeah. And when we can't see it, we start to then form something ourselves again, which is like probably their golden calf moment. So they will have been used in Egypt to having a visible God, visible gods, right? And so whenever Moses is up the mountain a very long time, they start to go, well, where is this God? Who freed us? Oh, let's make him out of the gold that he's given us.
Yeah, I know. That's funny, that, isn't it? Because they get a hard time almost for worshipping another God, but they actually weren't. They thought they were worshipping Yahweh.
They have a festival.
They needed something to see, didn't they? They needed something to see.
And I'm just taken straight away, and I'm just, just sparked. What you guys have said has sparked this in me, and I felt the Lord give me this a couple of weeks ago for someone, and it got to the end of the Sunday, and I hadn't an opportunity to share it, and literally about to leave at 7 at East, and I met the guy who it was for, you know. And I think it's actually really applicable here, but too, it's like Thomas, who's like, I'm not going to believe unless I can put my fingers in to the wounds and all the stuff. And Jesus really graciously like meets him where he's at and says, well, here you are, right? And then Jesus says, but blessed are those who have not seen and who will not see and yet will believe. You know, I think that's a beautiful place for us to start and know that we are blessed because we have not seen in that sense, and yet we believe. And I think I just want to encourage you, you know, encourage us as we sit here as CFC. We have not seen in that sense. We haven't put our fingers in the physical touch and the physical hands of Christ, and yet we choose to believe. And that's going to be difficult at times. There's going to be times where, like the children of Israel, we doubt God's provision. We doubt He's there. Are you there? You know, we don't see you. We don't feel you. Don't you say? I don't feel. And yet we're still here. And yet we believe. And yet as we journey wilderness, as we journey freedom, we choose to believe, and we choose to have faith.
Yeah. I keep coming back to freed from, freed to. But even in that wilderness, like we are today, we are free from sin. We are free from the life that we were living, as Paul continues to remind as he writes. And now we almost are in this wilderness where we're awaiting the return of Christ. We're awaiting Jesus. And I take encouragement from that. It even makes me think of connect groups in our friendships and our community in church to keep encouraging each other as we wonder and as we have moments of like, yes, and then moments of like, where are you? What's going on?
It's kind of encouraging too. I think that, you know, in Exodus, it's a story of a family, of God's family, and how God forms community. I sometimes think we make our own discipleship journey really individualistic, right? Where it's like about my personal salvation, but actually for the people of God, it's a community salvation is the thing, and then that impacts you personally. Where I think we flip it around, where it's I'm me, I will join this community, where actually they're formed in community, and I think that's so important because my big formation journeys and big moments of growth, it hasn't happened in isolation, because it's only when I rub shoulders with people and get annoyed and frustrated or get encouraged, and you know it all happens,
or get provided for.
In community you see God working through others, and I think that's what's so important.
That's the thing, isn't it? You know, you're like, well, where is God? You know, well, you know, when someone shows up at your house and they've got a word or they've got something for you or whatever, you're like, oh, you know,
there he is.
Well, there he is. You know, and I know this is maybe where we'll probably head into in our last video, but it's that sense of as we journey wilderness, we don't do it alone. We journey into freedom, we don't do that alone either, because God, that's always God's intention, is for us to do it together. He does it together in His Godhead, and He calls us to do the same.
Yeah. It's brilliant. I think we can end it there in that sense. I think we are the free people. Do you know what I mean? Like, I know there's a lot of freedom talked about, especially in the country we live in, right? But we are the free people. What do we do with our freedom now? Becomes the question. Now we have the opportunities we're going to talk about to lead others to freedom, which we'll talk about in our next video. But thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully that sets you up for some good chats, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video.